Carl Jung's shocking truth about addiction and the path to real healing. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Addiction isn't just about substances or habits. It's often the symptom of a deeper hunger within the soul, a longing for meaning, connection, and wholeness. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll uncover Jung's shocking truth about addiction and explore how real healing begins not with willpower alone, but with a journey inward to face what we've been avoiding. As you listen, I invite you to reflect. What are you truly seeking beneath the surface of your daily patterns? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else's breakthrough. 1. Addiction is not always obvious. Addiction is not always what people imagine. It is not only in the bottle, the pill, or the needle. It can hide in the way your thumb moves across a screen for the 9th time in a single minute. Not because you're searching for something meaningful, but because silence feels unbearable. It can be the endless cycle of just one more episode until an entire night disappears into the glow of a screen. It can be the way your mood lifts only when a certain person's text arrives, giving you that small, fleeting hit of validation. Often, you are not chasing a high at all. You are running from a deep, untraceable low, one you can't quite put into words. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who explored the unseen depths of the human psyche, would never treat addiction by focusing on the habit alone. He believed addiction was not the real problem. It was a symptom, a sign that the soul was wounded and searching for something it had lost. He would not begin by telling you to quit scrolling or stop drinking. Instead, he would ask what emptiness you are trying to fill, what pain you are trying to bury, what truth you are afraid to face. To Jung, every addiction is rooted in a spiritual hunger, a longing for wholeness and meaning that has been misplaced into compulsions. Until that hunger is met at its source, no amount of willpower will truly set you free. We live in a culture that treats symptoms, delete the app, pour the alcohol down the sink, throw away the cigarettes, and while these actions can help in the short term, they do not touch the root. The soul cannot be deceived. If the wound remains unhealed, the addiction will only shift into a different form, moving from one habit to another, like water finding a new channel. Real healing is not about becoming better in the eyes of others. It is about becoming whole, reclaiming the lost parts of yourself, and integrating them into the truth of who you are. It means turning toward the very feelings you've been avoiding, the grief, the fear, the memories, and understanding that they are not there to destroy you, but to guide you. Every moment spent numbing yourself is a moment you turn away from your own soul. Yet the pain you are trying so hard to escape is often the doorway to your freedom. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Healing means facing that darkness directly, sitting with the discomfort and letting it speak. It is not a gentle path. It can feel like falling apart before you begin to come together, but it is the only path that leads to true freedom. Addiction, in its essence, is not about what you consume. It is about what consumes you. It is the silent battle between the false self you built to survive and the authentic self that longs to live. Freedom begins when you stop asking how to quit and start asking what your soul is truly starving for. When you feed that hunger with truth, love, and presence, the compulsion begins to loosen its grip, and even the most invisible chains will eventually break. Have you ever noticed the subtle addictions in your life? Those quiet habits that keep you distracted from what's really going on inside? If you have, share your experience in the comments so we can learn from one another. If not, comment, "I will pay attention," and let's begin this journey to real healing together. 2. Jung's core insight. Carl Jung's profound insight revealed that addiction is never the root problem. It is merely the visible symptom of something far deeper, a painful disconnection from the true self. This inner split, what Jung referred to as psychic splitting, often begins in childhood when authenticity carried a price. Perhaps the moments you spoke your truth were met with criticism, or when you expressed your feelings, you were told to toughen up and hide them. Maybe your dreams were dismissed as foolish, or your individuality was met with disapproval. Each time this happened, a message was imprinted in your mind. Certain parts of you were not safe to reveal. To survive, you learned to suppress those authentic parts and present only the version of yourself that others found acceptable. This mask brought safety, approval, and sometimes even love, but the cost was the abandonment of your own soul. And when the soul is denied, a void emerges, a void that often demands to be filled, sometimes in the form of addiction. In the modern world, this addiction is not limited to substances like alcohol or drugs. It appears in subtler, socially acceptable forms. It can be the constant compulsion to check your phone, scrolling endlessly through social media feeds as though searching for a piece of yourself in the approval of strangers. It can be the person who stays in a toxic relationship, not because they believe it's love, but because they fear facing the ache of solitude. It can be the overachiever who works late every night, not out of passion, but to escape the silence that forces them to confront their inner emptiness. It can be the late-night binge watcher who fears the stillness that might bring up old wounds. These are not simply bad habits. They are coping mechanisms, attempts to soothe the discomfort of a life lived behind a mask. Carl Jung understood that removing the addictive behavior without addressing its cause is like cutting weeds at the surface while leaving the roots untouched. The behavior will return in another form because the true wound, the absence of wholeness, remains unhealed. That's why someone might quit drinking only to become addicted to work, or step away from an unhealthy relationship only to repeat the same dynamic with a different person. Without reconnecting with the lost parts of ourselves, the cycle continues. Consider the colleague who buries themselves in projects long after office hours, not out of ambition, but because the tension at home feels unbearable. Or the friend who curates every moment for social media, chasing validation that temporarily fills a deeper void. On the surface, these behaviors may look different, but at their core, they are all born from the same hunger, the hunger to feel whole, seen, and safe in one's own skin. Jung would say that until we face this spiritual wound, no real healing can take root. True healing is not about finding a shinier, more convincing mask. It is about removing the mask altogether and meeting the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. It is about turning toward the inner child who once had to hide for safety and letting them know they are free now. It is about listening to your needs without dismissing them, honoring your feelings without shame, and choosing to live according to what is real for you, even if it means losing the approval of others. This is not only psychological work, it is deeply spiritual work. For when you reclaim the abandoned pieces of yourself, you do more than overcome addiction. You restore the integrity of your soul. Addiction, then, is not your enemy. It is your messenger. The habit is not the disease. It is the signal that something within you is longing to be healed. The path to real freedom is not in taking away the crutch and pretending you can walk, but in strengthening the parts of you that once felt too broken to stand. And in the words of Carl Jung, when you live in alignment with your true self, you no longer need the false comforts that once kept you alive. You become whole, and in that wholeness, you discover a freedom that no addiction can ever replace. 3. Spiritual thirst. Carl Jung believed that addiction is rarely about the drug, the drink, or the habit. It is about a spiritual thirst so deep that the soul cries out for wholeness, for something true to fill the hollow spaces inside. This thirst cannot be satisfied by alcohol, pills, gambling, or the endless late-night scrolling through your phone. It is a hunger for meaning, for real connection, and for the lost parts of yourself you abandoned long ago. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Most addictions are not a pursuit of pleasure, but an escape from pain. You are not chasing a high. You are trying to outrun a low you may not even understand. One that often comes from years of emotional neglect, buried grief, or living a life that betrays your own nature. Addiction, in Jung's view, is the unconscious mind's desperate attempt to restore balance, to drag you toward the parts of yourself you've ignored. Yet you cannot heal what you refuse to face. Detoxing the body without healing the soul is like repainting a house whose foundation is crumbling. It may look fine for a moment, but it is still falling apart. The real work begins when you stop asking, "How do I quit?" and start asking, "What is my pain trying to tell me?" Imagine the man who works himself to exhaustion every week, then drowns his evenings in alcohol to unwind. On the surface, the problem is the drinking. In truth, the real wound is spiritual. He feels trapped in a life that does not align with his values, cut off from anything that brings his heart to life. The bottle is only a bandage. The wound lies deeper. Healing begins when he dares to face the silence he has avoided and reconnects with the lost parts of his soul. Jung's approach to addiction was not about attacking the symptom, but awakening the soul. Without addressing the root cause, the emptiness, the disconnection, the loss of spiritual alignment, recovery remains fragile. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Without that why, we look for substitutes for small, fleeting hits of pleasure to fill the void. True healing is found by answering the deeper call, slowing down enough to hear the voice within, seeking spiritual nourishment in nature, in art, in prayer, in meditation, in acts of service, anything that feeds the soul in ways no substance can. It is making peace with pain, not by drowning it, but by listening to it. The thing you fear most, turning towards your emptiness, is the doorway to the fullness you have been searching for all along. When you meet your shadow and hold your pain with compassion instead of running from it, the addiction begins to loosen its grip. Healing is not instant, and it is rarely comfortable, but it is the most important journey you will ever take. Because addiction is not a curse, It is a signal, a spiritual alarm that your soul is ready to come home. Comment below, "I choose wholeness," to affirm your commitment to healing the inner emptiness and embracing your true spiritual path. 4. Dopamine and emotional suppression. Chronic suppression of true needs and emotions quietly erodes the vitality of the soul, draining the brain's dopamine reserves until life feels stripped of color and meaning. In this flattened emotional state, the mind becomes desperate for stimulation, searching for artificial relief through behaviors that offer quick, temporary highs. What begins as a harmless escape, a glass of wine after work, hours lost in social media, compulsive online shopping gradually transforms into a cycle of emptiness, craving, escape, shame, and back to emptiness. Over time, the brain learns to depend on these fleeting bursts of pleasure, not to seek joy, but to avoid the gnawing void within, a void that is not merely psychological, but deeply spiritual. This void often hides behind masks that society praises: discipline, productivity, resilience. You tell yourself you are strong because you endure discomfort, successful because you never stop working, in control because you suppress what hurts. Yet beneath the surface, the soul is starving. By silencing your emotional truth to maintain peace, meet expectations, or uphold an image, you teach your inner self that its needs are unworthy of attention. This silent abandonment deepens the hunger for escape, making the addictive cycle feel both inevitable and inescapable. True healing is not found in simply stopping the behavior, but in reclaiming the parts of yourself that were exiled in the process of survival. Carl Jung believed that addiction could not be cured through discipline alone. It required a reconnection to the soul. Turning toward your emotions rather than running from them allows dopamine to flow naturally again, not through artificial highs, but through authentic self-alignment. This is a process of sitting with discomfort, facing shame without letting it define you, and walking into the locked rooms of your own heart to bring back what you once abandoned. Addiction, then, is not only a prison, but also a message, a call from the soul that something vital has been neglected for far too long. The emptiness is not the enemy, but the doorway. By stepping into it with courage, you discover that what you were seeking in every escape was never outside of you. It was the forgotten wholeness of your own being, patiently waiting for your return. 5. Healing requires integration, not willpower. Carl Jung said that true healing is never about suppressing or overpowering your impulses. It is about bringing what lies hidden in the unconscious into the light of awareness, facing the shadow you have buried, and reclaiming the parts of yourself you have long abandoned. Willpower alone can make you quit for a while, but it cannot transform you because it does not address the root cause of the pain. Addictions, whether they are to alcohol, drugs, gambling, work, relationships, or even the endless scroll of a phone, are not the problem itself. They are the symptom, a signal that something inside you is unresolved. You might silence the craving for a season, but if you never look at the wound it is protecting, you will simply trade one addiction for another, living in the same cycle with a different disguise. It is like living in a house where certain rooms have been locked for years. You avoid them because of the memories they hold, but the dust and stale air in those rooms seep through the walls until the whole house feels heavy. Healing means unlocking those rooms, breathing new life into them, and letting every part of your inner home belong to you again. This is why so many people relapse or shift from one coping mechanism to another. A person may give up drinking, but never face the deep loneliness that drove them to it. Eventually, that emptiness will demand to be filled again, perhaps by overworking, binge watching, or seeking constant approval. In our modern world, we are told to fix ourselves with routines, motivational slogans, or productivity hacks. But often, these are just sophisticated ways of running from ourselves. Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to acknowledge does not disappear. It becomes the invisible force that shapes our thoughts, choices, and relationships. The overly cheerful friend masking despair. The high achiever driven by a fear of being unworthy. The influencer who shines online but feels hollow when the screen goes dark. All are examples of the shadow at work, quietly pulling the strings from beneath the surface. Real recovery is therefore a spiritual journey of integration. It is not about killing the part of you that seeks escape, but understanding what it has been trying to protect all along. It is about meeting the wounded inner child who learned to survive through avoidance or distraction and assuring them that it is now safe to feel, to grieve, to be seen. Integration means taking back every exiled piece of yourself until you stand whole and authentic, no longer fractured between who you are and who you pretend to be. This process will test you. It will demand that you sit with discomfort, face truths you have avoided, and let go of the false self you built for survival. But it is the only path that leads to freedom that lasts, because willpower may carry you through the beginning, but integration keeps you from going back. When you stop asking, "How can I resist this?" and start asking, "What is this trying to tell me about my soul?" you turn addiction from an enemy into a messenger. And when you finally listen, with courage and compassion, you discover that healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you have been all along. Leave a like, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Type in the comments, "I choose to heal and reclaim my whole self," to affirm your journey toward true recovery and inner peace. 6. 3 core tools for healing. There are 3 core tools that, when embraced fully, can transform the way you approach addiction and open the door to deep spiritual healing. Shadow work is the first, and it is more than a mental exercise. It is an act of profound courage. It calls you to sit with the hidden, wounded, and rejected parts of yourself that you have tried to bury. Through journaling and honest self-reflection, you give voice to the stories you've silenced, the memories you've avoided, and the emotions you've denied. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Shadow work is the process of taking back the pen from fate and writing your own story with awareness. It is walking into the forgotten rooms of your inner world and turning on the light, not to shame what you find, but to listen and integrate it. Every time you face the shadow, instead of numbing it, you reclaim a piece of your soul, bringing yourself one step closer to wholeness. Breathwork is the second tool, and it serves as a bridge between the conscious mind and the deep storehouse of memory and emotion held in the body. This is not just taking deep breaths, but a deliberate, and rhythmic engagement with your life force. When you breathe consciously, you allow your nervous system to unwind, giving trapped emotions and unprocessed trauma a safe passage to release. The body remembers everything: the heartbreaks you thought you forgot, the fear you pushed down, the grief you didn't know how to carry, and the breath gently loosens these knots. In moments of focused breathing, many people find themselves touched by insights, visions, and an unmistakable sense of spiritual connection. It is as if each breath becomes a sacred key, unlocking the door to wisdom and freedom. Addiction thrives in disconnection, and breath work dissolves that distance, rooting you fully in the here and now. Symbolic ritual is the third tool, and it speaks in the language of the soul. Ritual bypasses the intellect and reaches the deeper layers of your being, where true transformation happens. This can be as simple as lighting a candle and allowing its flame to remind you of the eternal spark within, or writing a heartfelt letter to the version of yourself trapped in addiction, not with judgment, but with compassion, forgiveness, and release. Ritual works because the soul understands symbols in a way the rational mind cannot. Carl Jung believed that healing often emerges when we reconnect with the archetypal and symbolic dimensions of life, for they awaken dormant aspects of ourselves that routine life neglects. When you perform a ritual with intention, you create sacred space where healing is not merely a concept, but an embodied experience you can feel in your bones. When shadow work, breath work, and symbolic ritual are woven together, they form a path that does not just treat addiction symptoms, but addresses its roots. Addiction is rarely only about the substance or the habit. It is a messenger, pointing toward an inner fracture, a spiritual disconnection, a call from the deepest part of you to return home. Shadow work helps you face and reclaim what you have hidden. Breath work helps you release what has been stored away. And ritual helps you speak directly to the soul, restoring the bond between who you are and who you were meant to be. In walking this path, you begin to understand that healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering and returning to the wholeness that was always within you. As we explore these three core tools for healing: shadow work, breath work, and symbolic ritual, let this be your moment to commit to your own transformation. Your presence here shows your soul's readiness to reclaim its wholeness. Comment below: I choose to heal my soul, as a declaration of your journey toward real freedom. Now, let's walk together toward the next chapter of your healing. 7. Individuation. Becoming whole. Healing is not about returning to who you were before the pain or the addiction. It is about becoming whole, stepping into a truer version of yourself that your soul has always been calling you toward. To walk this path means creating a life that feeds your soul, not just your schedule. It is no longer about filling every hour with tasks, noise, or distractions to keep from facing yourself, but about intentionally shaping your days around what truly nourishes you at the deepest level. This could be moments of stillness in nature, deep conversations with people who see you, creative work that stirs your spirit, or spiritual practices that bring you into connection with something greater than yourself. When you live in a way that honors your truth, life stops feeling like something you need to escape from and begins to feel like something you are grateful to be in. It also means replacing stimulation with meaning. Addiction often works by hijacking the brain with a loop of short-lived dopamine hits, giving the illusion of satisfaction while leaving you emptier than before. The high becomes less about pleasure and more about avoiding discomfort. True healing requires breaking that loop and finding fulfillment in what is slow, steady, and real building skills. Investing in relationships, aligning your work with your values, and engaging in pursuits that enrich your inner world. These may not deliver an immediate rush, but they bring a lasting peace that continues to grow. Meaning feeds the soul in a way that stimulation never can. And over time, the craving for quick fixes fades in the light of deeper purpose. A vital part of this journey is learning to see relapse not as failure, but as information. Healing does not move in a straight line, it spirals. You may face familiar challenges again, but each time with greater awareness and more tools than before. Relapse becomes a mirror, reflecting the places where your soul still feels unseen, unheard, or unloved. Instead of drowning in shame, you can meet these moments with curiosity, asking what needs attention, what boundaries need to be strengthened, or what inner wounds still need care. This shift transforms setbacks into stepping stones, each one moving you toward integration rather than away from it. To embrace individuation is to accept that the goal is not perfection, but wholeness. It is gathering the lost, wounded, and hidden parts of yourself and bringing them home with compassion. It is stepping out of the roles you once played for survival and living in the freedom of authenticity. It is the slow, sacred work of becoming someone who no longer wears a mask, no longer lives in a cage, no longer hides from the truth of who they are. And in this becoming, you do not simply recover, you awaken. You are no longer the person you were before addiction, nor are you defined by it. You are the person your soul has been shaping you to be all along. If this journey into individuation has sparked something in you, take the next step toward becoming your truest self. Comment below, "I choose wholeness," to affirm your path. Your voice not only strengthens your commitment, but also inspires others walking this road of real healing. 8. The transformation. Carl Jung taught that addiction is rarely the core problem. It is the echo of something far deeper, a symptom of the soul's hunger for wholeness. It's the emptiness left when parts of yourself were abandoned, your shadow with its hidden truths, your inner child with its innocence, your artist with its passion, your dreamer with its hope, your spiritual seeker with its longing. These are the fragments you left behind in moments of shame, heartbreak, or rejection, and the void they create becomes unbearable. You try to fill it with alcohol, work, endless scrolling, toxic relationships, or any distraction that numbs the silence. But Jung believed that this emptiness, as painful as it is, can become the very doorway to transformation if you are willing to reclaim every part of yourself that you once exiled. I once knew a man named Daniel who seemed to have everything society admires: a successful career, a beautiful apartment, and a wide circle of friends. But when the noise of the day faded, he couldn't bear being alone with himself. He filled the quiet with late nights, constant social media, and an endless chase for connection that never satisfied him. The turning point came when he realized he had lost the ability to recognize his own reflection, not just in the mirror, but in his life. That was when the real work began. Instead of simply quitting the behaviors that numbed him, he started asking the questions Jung would demand. Who am I beneath the masks? What parts of me have I hidden because they didn't seem acceptable? What is my soul truly yearning for? Slowly, he began to welcome back the painter who once saw beauty in small things, the curious thinker who questioned life's patterns, the child who laughed without fear. This is the essence of transformation, not becoming someone else, but becoming whole again. It is the courageous act of gathering your shadow, your inner child, your artist, your dreamer, and your seeker into one integrated life. Jung called this individuation, the process of uniting all aspects of the self into harmony. It is rarely clean or comfortable. It requires facing pain you've buried, truths you've avoided, and emotions you've feared. But as you do, the chains of addiction fall away, not because you forced them to, but because you no longer need them. Wholeness makes the addiction obsolete. Addiction, then, can be the catalyst that forces you to stop living in fragments and start living as your full self. The shadow becomes your strength, the inner child your joy, the dreamer your vision, and the seeker your guide. When you weave them all together, you not only find liberation, you rediscover the life that was waiting for you all along. And as Carl Jung would say, that is the path to real healing, to reclaim what was lost, to live without masks, and to let your soul finally come home. And so, the real healing journey is not just about breaking free from the substance or the habit. It's about returning to the deeper truth of who you are, the part of you that's been calling out beneath the noise, waiting to be heard. As Carl Jung taught, addiction is not the enemy, it is the messenger, pointing us toward the wounds our soul longs to heal. If this message spoke to you, let it be the start of your own path to wholeness. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with insight, guidance, and inspiration for your spiritual journey. You can't heal addiction until you face this inner truth. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung's timeless insight reminds us that true healing begins not with resisting our pain, but with understanding the message it carries. Addiction, in all its forms, is often not the enemy, but a signal from deep within, urging us to confront the truths we've hidden from ourselves. In today's journey on Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore how facing this inner truth can set you free and transform your life from the inside out. As you listen, I invite you to reflect. Have you ever considered that what you're struggling with might actually be guiding you toward growth? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your story could be the spark that inspires someone else's healing. 1. Addiction is a messenger, not an enemy. Addiction is not the enemy. It is the messenger sent from the depths of the soul, carrying a truth you may have spent years avoiding. It is not a flaw to be erased or a weakness to be hidden. It is the soul's symbolic cry for wholeness, for healing, for transformation. What you think of as a destructive habit is, in reality, a coded signal from the unconscious, pointing toward a wound that has remained unresolved, a fracture in your spiritual and emotional foundation that has been silently shaping your life. The psyche, like the body, speaks when it suffers, and it never speaks without reason. Just as physical pain alerts you to an injury that must be treated, addiction alerts you to an inner injury that has been neglected for too long. It is not random, nor is it senseless. It is the soul's way of insisting that you turn inward and listen. Jung understood that the unconscious is not chaos, but a living, intelligent system that communicates in symbols, dreams, and patterns. Addiction is one of its most persistent symbols, a form of language that demands you stop, pay attention, and confront what has been buried. Often, beneath the surface of addiction lies a story of grief, abandonment, betrayal, or a profound loss of connection to your authentic self. The substance, the behavior, the compulsion, whether it is alcohol, drugs, perfectionism, or power, becomes a substitute for something sacred that has been lost. A feeling of belonging, a sense of safety, a deep connection to the divine within. Many try to fight addiction with sheer willpower, counting days, replacing habits, or punishing themselves for every perceived failure. But the truth is that you cannot heal by attacking the symptom alone. You cannot silence the messenger without losing the message. The reason so many relapse is not because they are weak, but because the wound remains untouched. Real transformation begins when you stop asking, "How do I destroy this?" and start asking, "What is this here to teach me about my soul?" When you meet addiction with curiosity instead of condemnation, you open the door to a spiritual dialogue that can lead you to reclaim the lost parts of yourself. This does not excuse the harm addiction causes, but it reframes the struggle so that it becomes an opportunity for self-restoration rather than self-destruction. Addiction then shifts from being a life sentence to becoming a sacred invitation, an urgent call from within to face the truths you have feared, to bring light to the shadows you have ignored. And when you answer that call, you will see that what once felt like your greatest curse was, in truth, the soul's way of leading you back to the wholeness you were always meant to find. Have you ever listened to what your addiction is truly trying to tell you? If you have, share your insight in the comments so others can learn from your journey. If not, comment, "I'm ready to listen," and let's take the first step toward transformation together. 2. The root is in the shadow. Carl Jung taught that addiction is not a random flaw in human character, but a direct messenger from the parts of ourselves we have banished into the unconscious, the shadow. This shadow is made up of exiled aspects of your being, the ones you have suppressed, shamed, or denied, often because at some point in life, you were taught they were unacceptable. But those parts do not disappear simply because you ignore them. Instead, they push back, finding ways to express themselves through patterns and behaviors that may seem destructive on the surface. Addiction, whether to alcohol, drugs, food, sex, work, social media, or even perfection, is not simply about the substance or habit. It is about the deep, hidden wound beneath it. It is a coping mechanism, a way to numb or distract yourself from the unresolved pain, unmet needs, and unprocessed emotions buried inside. And until these parts of yourself are faced with honesty and compassion, the compulsion will persist no matter how many times you try to quit. In everyday life, it is easy to misunderstand this truth. You might see someone who seems to have it all, a good job, a happy family, and social respect, yet behind closed doors, they cannot stop drinking, endlessly scrolling, or secretly overeating. From the outside, It might look like a failure of willpower, but from the inside, it is the soul's cry for integration. Perhaps as a child, they learned that vulnerability was dangerous, so they buried their sadness under a mask of control. Perhaps they were told their feelings didn't matter, so they silenced their voice until the silence turned into a deep, gnawing ache. Carl Jung understood that what society calls weakness is often an attempt, albeit unconscious, to protect oneself from re-experiencing old wounds. This is why healing can never be achieved through discipline alone. You can change your environment, quit the substance, or end the relationship. But if the wound remains untouched, the shadow will simply find a new disguise. This is why people often experience addiction swaps. The alcoholic becomes obsessed with fitness. The compulsive spender becomes a workaholic, and the chronic gambler gets trapped in toxic relationships. The pattern shifts shape, but the root remains the same. The shadow still waits to be seen. In modern culture, we are taught to run from discomfort, to drown it in busyness, entertainment, or achievement. We believe that by keeping ourselves distracted, we are moving forward, but in reality, we are only postponing the confrontation with ourselves. Carl Jung's work reveals that the real battlefield is not outside, but within, and that our deepest freedom comes from walking directly into that battlefield with open eyes. To face the shadow is not to indulge harmful behavior, but to become curious about its purpose. Every compulsion carries a story. Within the addict's repetitive cycle lies a wounded child longing to be heard, a silenced voice waiting to speak, a creative spark that was once extinguished by shame. When you begin to see your shadow not as an enemy, but as an abandoned part of yourself that still holds energy, creativity, and truth, you step into the process of integration. Integration means allowing the light and the dark to exist together within you, without one trying to destroy the other. It means reclaiming your power from the places you have given it away. The truth is that your shadow is not only made of pain, it also contains lost treasures. The very part of you you've been running from might hold the depth of empathy you've always admired in others, the creative force that can change your life's direction, or the strength to set boundaries and honor your worth. Addiction becomes a teacher, not a curse, when you stop asking, "How do I get rid of this?" and start asking, "What is this trying to reveal about me?" By following this path, you begin to move beyond suppression and relapse into a life where you are no longer divided against yourself. Carl Jung's enduring message is that the goal is not perfection, but wholeness, and wholeness is only possible when you embrace both your light and your shadow, bringing every exiled part of your soul back home. 3. You're addicted to the relief, not the substance. You are not chained to the bottle, the needle, the endless scroll, or the late-night phone call to someone who is no good for you. You are chained to the relief they give you, the temporary hush in the storm inside your head, the fragile silence where guilt loosens its grip. Pain retreats to the corners, and the voice of your inner critic fades into the background. The substance, the behavior, the person, these are not the addiction itself. They are merely the doors you keep running through to escape the deeper, unspoken spiritual ache you don't yet know how to face. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that darkness is not out there in the world. It is the shame you have swallowed for years, the grief you never allowed yourself to fully feel, the old wounds you dressed in distractions instead of healing. You don't reach for the drink because you crave the liquid. You crave the moment when the memories stop screaming. You don't lose yourself in work or perfectionism because you love it. You do it because it drowns out the quiet terror of feeling unworthy. And yet, relief is a treacherous friend. It stays just long enough to convince you you're safe, then vanishes, leaving you emptier than before. Addiction is not here to destroy you, though it will if you keep ignoring its message. It is here as a messenger, pointing straight at the wound in your soul that you have refused to touch. And if you only attack the habit without healing the wound, you will simply trade one addiction for another, because the real root still bleeds beneath the surface. This is why every addiction, in its truest form, is not just a chemical dependency or a bad habit. It is a spiritual crisis, a fracture between who you are and the parts of yourself you cannot bear to look at. The paradox is cruel. What you are running from is the very thing that can set you free. Imagine a child who grows up being told every day they are worthless. That child might grow into an adult who turns to alcohol, drugs, compulsive achievement, or unhealthy relationships, not out of love for those things, but because each one offers a brief escape from the voice of worthlessness. But when the high fades, the voice returns, now louder, because shame has multiplied. This is the cycle: pain, escape, temporary relief, deeper pain, and it will keep turning until you dare to step off the wheel. You cannot heal by simply asking, "How do I stop?" You must ask, "What is the pain I keep running from?" Only then can you begin the real work. Feeling what you have avoided, grieving what you have lost, forgiving what has been done, and feeding the part of your soul that has been starving. When the soul is nourished, the body has no need for excess. The addiction loosens its hold, not because you wrestled it into submission, but because the wound it once numbed no longer controls you. And until you face this truth, you will keep searching for peace in the very things that steal it from you. If this message resonates with you, comment, "I choose healing" below, so we can continue exploring how to break free from the real roots of addiction together. 4. It's a failed initiation. Addiction is not simply about the substance, the behavior, or the habit. It is the restless cry of the soul, a deep and often unspoken longing for connection, meaning, and transformation. Carl Jung described it as a failed initiation, an unconscious attempt to reach the divine or to undergo profound inner change. But without the guidance of a wise mentor, without the structure of a sacred ritual, and without a deeper purpose to anchor the process, this longing becomes twisted and distorted. Beneath every addiction is a yearning to break free from the numbness of ordinary life, to step into a state of being that feels alive, awakened, and whole. Yet, in the absence of true direction, the seeker becomes lost in the wilderness of craving. The bottle becomes the altar, the pill becomes the prayer, and the high becomes the false vision, each one a counterfeit ritual that promises liberation, but instead binds the spirit in heavier chains. In ancient cultures, initiations were sacred rites of passage. They stripped away the false self, challenged the individual to face fear and death, and guided them toward rebirth, all under the watchful care of elders who understood the terrain of the spirit. These rituals were designed to bring the soul into harmony with its higher calling, to awaken courage, wisdom, and purpose. The modern addict unknowingly seeks the same transformation, but without the sacred container, their journey turns into a dangerous imitation of the real thing, tearing down the old life, but unable to build a new one. This is why true healing is never just about stopping the addictive behavior. Ending the habit without finding something to replace it leaves a void, and the soul will always try to fill that emptiness. The work of recovery is to replace the counterfeit ritual with one that genuinely nourishes and sustains. A true ritual can take many forms: meditation, prayer, artistic expression, service to others, or time spent in a sacred community. These are not mere activities. They are lifelines to the deeper self, paths that lead the soul back to the divine. The goal is not to destroy desire, but to refine it, to redirect it toward what is real and enduring. When longing is met with the right offering, it becomes a source of strength rather than destruction. Even the simplest acts, a silent walk at sunrise, a daily moment of gratitude, or honest self-reflection, can become sacred practices. In the language of the soul, these small gestures are monumental, for they rebuild the bridge between the human and the divine within. Addiction, at its core, is not a search for escape. It is a search for initiation, for the sacred turning point when the old self dies and the soul steps into its true life. When you answer this call with practices that honor your spirit and align with your purpose, the need for the false light fades away. You no longer chase the counterfeit fire because you have found the flame that was meant to guide you all along. If this speaks to your soul and you are ready to transform, repeat after me. I am ready to release the false ritual and embrace the sacred one that nourishes my soul. 5. The wound must be witnessed. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this truth lies at the heart of healing addiction. Addiction is rarely just a bad habit or a sign of weak will. More often, it is a shield that protects you from a pain you have not yet been able to face. You may think you are fighting the bottle, the pills, the late-night compulsions, or the obsessive behaviors, but in reality, you are wrestling with something much deeper than the wound that these habits have been guarding. The human psyche will go to extraordinary lengths to protect itself from unbearable truths, even if it means harming your health, your relationships, and your future. Those coping mechanisms act like guards standing in front of a locked door within you, a door that conceals grief, rejection, abandonment, or shame that once felt too overwhelming to confront. If you spend all your time trying to fight the guards without opening the door, you will always find yourself back at the same place. True healing begins when you stop fighting only the symptom and start listening to the message. Consider the person who works 16-hour days, fueled by caffeine, eating on the run, and claiming they are simply driven. To the outside world, it looks like ambition, but underneath, it may be a desperate escape from loneliness, from the echo of an empty home, or from the sting of a love that ended badly. The overwork is not the real problem, it is the armor. Addiction works in the same way. The key to breaking free is to witness your wound, to bring it out of hiding, to see it without judgment, to grieve for what you lost, and to name the truth you have been avoiding. Carl Jung's insight reminds us that the wound cannot be healed in darkness, because darkness is where shame thrives, and shame is the soil where addiction grows. It is like trying to heal an infection without ever cleaning it. No matter how much you cover it up, it will fester. When you choose to bring your pain into the light, whether through honest self-reflection, therapy, speaking your truth to someone you trust, or deep spiritual work, you strip it of its ability to control you in secret. The process is uncomfortable, even painful, because reopening a wound can feel like reliving the hurt. There will be moments when you want to retreat, to push it back down, to pretend it is not there. But every time you face it, speak it, and allow yourself to feel it, you take away its grip on your life. Healing is not about erasing the past or pretending it never happened. It is about meeting yourself with compassion and courage in the places you have feared to go. Addiction is not your enemy, but a signal, an invitation to confront the part of you that has been left unseen for too long. As Carl Jung's work teaches, the soul often grows in the very places where the pain feels unbearable. By choosing to witness your wound, you begin not only to heal from addiction, but to reclaim the wholeness of your being, transforming what once felt like a curse into the most profound source of strength you will ever know. Leave your likes, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Type in the comments, "I am ready to face my wounds and heal completely." 6. Integration, not suppression, heals. Carl Jung taught that real healing comes not from suppression, but from integration, because you cannot conquer the shadow by force. The harder you try to reject or bury it, the more it pushes back, growing stronger in the darkness of denial. The shadow is not your enemy. It is a messenger, carrying fragments of your truth that have been cast aside. It holds the unspoken grief, the buried fears, the unmet needs, and the forgotten pieces of your soul that still ache for recognition. Addiction, in any form, whether to substances, perfection, approval, control, or even to the comfort of familiar pain, is never just about the behavior itself. It is a spiritual signal, pointing toward the parts of you that remain unhealed, the wounds you have not dared to face. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And in this lies the path forward." Healing is not about purifying yourself into some idealized version of perfection. Perfection is a rigid mask, a performance for the outside world. Wholeness, however, is honest, unfiltered, and deeply human. It means making space for every part of yourself, the noble and the flawed, the radiant and the wounded, and allowing them to coexist in harmony. Imagine locking a crying child in a room to stop the noise. The silence might seem like relief, but the pain festers, unseen and unheard. This is what happens when you suppress your shadow. It will not vanish. It will simply find new ways to cry out, often through self-sabotage, compulsive habits, and patterns you cannot seem to escape. Integration, on the other hand, asks you to open the door, to kneel down, to hold that child and say, "I see you. I am listening." This is the essence of spiritual healing, meeting yourself where you are, without judgment, and asking, "What are you trying to show me?" The answers may be raw and uncomfortable. They may reveal how much you've abandoned yourself in the pursuit of approval, how long you've lived in fear of rejection, or how deeply you've hidden the parts of you that once dreamed without limit. But by listening instead of fighting, you begin to reclaim what you've lost. This is why the shadow, when faced with compassion, transforms from a saboteur into a guide. Every dark corner you illuminate becomes a source of strength because it no longer controls you from behind the scenes. You are no longer chasing an illusion of purity or trying to earn worthiness by erasing your flaws. Instead, you are embracing the truth that wholeness is not about being spotless. It is about being real. Integration turns the very wounds you feared into the wisdom you need. It turns addiction from a punishment into a teacher, one that will not leave until its lesson is learned. The moment you stop running from the shadow and begin walking toward it with openness is the moment you step onto the path of true transformation. This is not a quick escape, but a lifelong journey of radical self-awareness, emotional courage, and spiritual alignment, where every piece of you is invited home. 7. Meaning replaces addiction. The soul cannot live on emptiness, and when meaning is absent, something else will rush in to take its place. Addiction is often that substitute, not simply a weakness or a bad habit, but a desperate attempt to fill a hollow space inside. Without a sense of purpose, the human spirit begins to starve, and a starving soul will consume anything that offers even a fleeting sense of relief, even if it is slowly destroying it. Carl Jung understood that compulsion is not just about the object of addiction. It is about the absence of significance, the lack of something to live for. When life feels void of meaning, the psyche will reach for anything to feel alive, whether it's alcohol, gambling, endless scrolling, or the relentless pursuit of perfection. These behaviors are not random. They are misguided survival strategies, counterfeit forms of purpose that promise comfort but never deliver true fulfillment. Healing, therefore, is not merely about cutting off the harmful behavior, but about replacing it with something deeper, richer, and nourishing to the soul. When you find purpose, when you wake each day with a reason to create, to serve, to love, your suffering begins to take on shape. And in that shape, it can be transformed. Service to others pulls you out of the narrow tunnel of self-obsession and into the vast space of shared humanity, where your actions matter beyond yourself. Creative expression, whether painting, writing, building, or making music, channels the restless energy of compulsion into beauty and truth, turning what once destroyed you into something that heals you. A life without meaning runs from pain. A life with purpose moves toward fulfillment. The moment you give your suffering a role in a larger story, raising a child with love, building something for your community, creating work that reflects your inner truth, you strip addiction of its power. Pain becomes a teacher, not a prison. The urge to escape fades when your days are filled with acts and creations that matter. When you feed your soul with service, creativity, and alignment with your values, the false nourishment of addiction is no longer needed. The emptiness closes, the spirit breathes again, and the compulsion that once held you captive loses its grip entirely. Comment: I agree. If you believe that purpose and meaning can free us from addiction. Or, I don't think so, if you see it differently. 8. Addiction can be a doorway to transformation. Carl Jung believed that addiction, when truly understood, is not just a destructive force, but also a profound spiritual message from the depths of the unconscious, a signal that there is an unresolved truth within you that demands to be faced. Addiction often begins as an attempt to escape pain, fill a void, or silence the restless voice inside. Yet beneath the surface, it points to deep wounds, unmet needs, and forgotten aspects of the self. When confronted consciously, it becomes more than a battle for control. It transforms into a sacred rite of passage, a journey toward individuation, where the fragmented pieces of your soul are gathered and integrated into a whole. In this process, you do not return to the person you were before the addiction. Instead, you emerge as someone wiser, stronger, and more capable of living with depth, courage, and compassion. I once knew a man in his 40s who had struggled for years with a gambling addiction. To others, it looked like he was chasing the thrill of winning, but in truth, he was trying to numb the ache of feeling unseen and unworthy. Raised in a home where love was conditional and success was the only measure of worth, he learned early on that vulnerability was dangerous. Every spin of the roulette wheel gave him a fleeting escape from the internal voice whispering that he wasn't enough. His life began to change when he finally stopped running from that voice and decided to face it. Through therapy, journaling, and raw, honest conversations, he discovered that his addiction wasn't just a problem to be eliminated. It was a messenger pointing directly toward his need for self-acceptance and emotional healing. Like Carl Jung described, he realized that true freedom wasn't about erasing the behavior, but about understanding the truth it concealed. By confronting his pain instead of avoiding it, he uncovered the strength and wholeness that had always been waiting within him. This is the essence of Jung's teaching. Real healing is not found in simply ending the addictive behavior, but in illuminating the inner reality that sustains it. Addiction survives in the shadows, feeding on avoidance and self-denial, and it thrives when we cling to old patterns out of fear. To heal, you must step into the very territory you've spent years avoiding your unconscious mind. That is where the buried pain lives, but it is also where your hidden gifts and untapped potential reside. The journey into the unconscious demands courage because it will challenge your self-image and force you to confront the parts of yourself you've rejected. Yet this is the path to individuation, the process of becoming whole by embracing every aspect of yourself, the light and the dark, the wounded and the wise, the flawed and the resilient. When you take this path, you begin to see your addiction not as a life sentence, but as a turning point, a hidden invitation to live more authentically. You realize that you are not broken. You are in the middle of transformation. You stop fighting against your past and start learning from it. And this shift gives you the strength to live with greater depth, courage, and compassion. You also develop the ability to extend that compassion to others, recognizing that everyone carries their own hidden battles. In the end, the value of this journey is not just in overcoming addiction, but in reclaiming your true self. The challenge is to stop resisting the truth that your struggle has been trying to reveal to you, to face it with humility and honesty, and to allow it to guide you into a more integrated, authentic life. As Carl Jung reminds us, the very treasure you seek lies hidden in the place you fear to enter, and only by stepping into that darkness can you claim the gold of your soul. To honor your own journey of transformation, make it known today. Comment below. I rise transformed, to affirm your courage and inspire others to step into their true, integrated selves. And so, as Jung reminds us, true healing doesn't begin with running from the fire, but with walking straight into its light and seeing what it's been trying to tell you all along. Addiction isn't just a chain to break, it's a messenger carrying a truth your soul has been waiting to face. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, turning on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming insights. Your journey of self-discovery is just beginning.